thing is really distracting me.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, it's Jordan. I am here still in Louisville, and I'm in City Hall, where I am joined by City Council President David James, who has been active in the current protests, responding to protester demands while working in the confines of City Hall. So I first wanted to ask you, what's it been like the last 3 months since March? You had the Breonna Taylor murder, then David McAtee, which we're going to talk about. I know you and he were friends. What's this been like in Louisville for you?
It's been riveting, I guess is the best way to say that. It's been a time of hurtfulness, sadness. Some rejoice in that I see people being motivated and activated. Sadness and frustration. It runs the entire spectrum.
Mm-hmm. And I've been speaking with protesters. I just spoke with Breonna's aunt. And you kind of get a feeling the mistreatment that the protesters feel from the police is not new, and that there's been a lot of history here with police, frankly, mishandling black people. We were here yesterday. Police came in, 12 police officers to pull down a tent. That apparently is not a new thing. What's your feeling in terms of police reform here? Is it simply, retraining, or does something more fundamental need to happen?
Oh no, I think it's a lot of things. I think it's about leadership. I have been complaining about the police leadership for a number of years. As a matter of fact, the Metro Council voted on a resolution to fire the police chief back 3 years ago, and the mayor refused to do so. So I believe that I don't want everybody to get focused only on the police. I think it's not just police. I think it's about the systemic issues of racism that are built into our country, into our city, and how to correct those things.
And I mean, here it's pretty striking. On the West End, it's been left to rot.
Absolutely.
Basically.
Yep.
Where you go to other parts of Kentucky, I mean, it's like this in other parts of the country too. But in the backdrop of this tension between police and the protesters is significant poverty.
Absolutely.
The protesters have been calling for money in the police department to be taken out of the police department and put into a $50 million fund for black businesses, moving police money into social causes, but the council just voted to basically increase the police budget. Why was that?
I wouldn't say that it was basically to increase the police budget. I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Well, the capital budget went up that you guys just voted on for the police budget. Am I wrong?
No, I don't. I'm not sure what you're talking about.
I just read that the police budget went from, I think it was 189 million to 190 million.
Right. Well, that's not. I don't consider that to be an increase. That's
Okay.
That's yes. So technically, yes, it was increased.
Right. I'm asking. The protesters have been asking to cut the police budget. So
Absolutely.
why?
So I don't believe it's an either-or situation. So we need police to do police work, but we also need to do a better job financing how we do other things, right? And so is it that we use the blunt instrument of the police department to handle all problems? Or is it that we try to figure out if we use social workers and mental health specialists in areas that we can use them in, and instead of using the police? Because the police go through about 40 hours of training to become a mental health specialist, and the reality of that is not really. And so we put money in the budget to start that program and to figure out how to best do that. And so that'll actually play out over the year. We will experiment with it, see what works, what doesn't work, and then we'll be able to make a better financial commitment towards doing that in the upcoming budget after we've had a year's experience to see what happens. So, I don't know the word is defunding the police, though. I think it's whether or not we try to find better ways to utilize the taxpayer dollars to get the best efficiency and the best use out of the police department and keep people safe.
Well, I guess like broader than just Louisville, but when you see for a city like Louisville $190 million for police, but such poverty here between joblessness, mental health issues, you would expect drug use and sales with the lack of investment. It just seems like, not just here, but across America, the priorities are to have these massive police budgets, but the very thing police are policing, drugs and things like that, could be improved with more of that money being moved over to jobs, social services. So what do you think in terms of basically there's just too much money in policing in places like Louisville? Is it really take that much money to keep a city safe?
Well, that's what we're going to find out this year.
Okay. I think that a lot of the protesters are looking. I mean, you look in places like New York City, $6 billion. Obviously, not to that scale here, but a lot of the protesters feel that the police are really. It's not so much protecting them, but protecting the status quo and the order of things. What has been your dealings with protesters? What have you been learning from hearing their demands? And things like that?
I talk to them every day, and right now they're focused on the firing of the police officers and a civilian review board. And so their first initial thing that they wanted was dealing with no-knock warrants. And so we listened to that and created Breonna's Law. And so now we're dealing with the civilian review board issue in the Office of Inspector General. We have a ordinance up right now to talk about police undergoing drug and urinalysis after a critical incident, and so we'll be going through that process. We also have a resolution out to deal with transparency as it relates to the city. Currently, the police department's radio transmissions and 911 calls and computer-aided dispatch logs are all open to the public right now. You could go there and say, I want to do an open records request for the computer-aided dispatch logs between 1 and 3 o'clock yesterday, and you would get that. Until the department says that it's under investigation, and then they won't let you have it. And so I believe that if it was open today, it should be open tomorrow. And so the administration often hides behind those things to keep information from the public. And so we're trying to get that out. And that's one of the frustrations that the protesters and our citizens have also.
And just at a basic level, I'm left wondering, why was there a need for Breonna Taylor in particular, for police to go in the middle of the night, no criminal record, works in as an EMT? Obviously, if you're sleeping at night and the police barge in, it's been told without announcing themselves, you're going to be quite scared. Couldn't police be handling this significantly different, which would have possibly led to a different outcome?
They could, and I don't speak for the police department, so I can't answer that.
But in terms of the Breonna Taylor situation, I mean, what do you think led the police to feeling they needed to go in the middle of the night?
Again, I'm not the mayor, right? I'm the president of the council. The police department works for the mayor. The chief works for the mayor. They haven't answered those questions, so I don't have an answer for you.
And in terms of the mayor, you've been outspoken about him. We've seen one police officer fired, 2 others are still there. There's been no criminal charges, even though we've seen witnesses that say that they went in, with a ram, that they didn't announce themselves. We also just found that they basically lied in the police report. Why has there been, I know you're not the police, but why have there not been charges if we have witnesses saying they came in unannounced, and we know that the police report, there was falsehoods?
The mayor. We don't control the hiring and firing. We have no ability to do that. It's 110% on the mayor.
Do you think there should be charges against the police officers?
I don't know. I have not seen the file. Nobody on the council has seen the file. Only the mayor's seen the file, and the police chief has seen the file. So we don't know.
I'm assuming you've asked for the file, the city council.
We have.
And moving on from Breonna Taylor, David McAtee, a couple of weeks later, was shot and killed during George Floyd protests. His name hasn't been as nationally known, but he was known in the community, would give police officers free meals,
Right.
other people free meals that were hard on times. This happened away from the protests. It's just there was people in the community out on a Sunday night, enjoying themselves. The Kentucky National Guard came, the police department came, and again, they were firing pepper balls and things like that, all because people were, out after curfew. I have a hard time believing that would have happened in Lexington.
Well, I have a hard time believing that would happen in other parts of the city.
So could you kind of talk about like what needs to change where there is de-escalation to start? Because the police very easily could have just approached them, civilly. Hey, guys, curfew.
That to me goes back to police leadership, a failure in police leadership. Someone told them to go down there and do that. And who was that?
The mayor, I would assume.
Somebody did. I don't know. We're waiting to find out.
And could you kind of talk about David? I mean, the irony is he was very kind to police, and police took his life. And again, they said he shot at them first, but the New York Times did an investigation that seems to suggest they were firing first. Pepper balls, I mean, who knows what they,
Right.
in the moment, you don't know what's being shot at
Right.
you. One almost hit his niece. So again, it just seems like the police here, from an outsider's point of view, kind of feel emboldened to shoot first, ask questions later.
So I would say that, first of all, I don't agree that, I think that you have to qualify that conversation. So did the police fire first? Did David McAtee fire first? Did the police fire ballistic rounds from a rifle first? No. Did the police fire pepper ball rounds from a pepper ball gun first? Yes. And so when they made the announcement that the police did not fire first, they didn't qualify that. So I think they should. I think in the heat of the moment that the average person isn't going to discern whether the projectile coming towards them is a lead bullet or a pepper ball, right? If you look out the window as you saw in that or the doorway, as you saw in that New York Times video of that, you see that bottle explode on the table. So obviously you recognize something is being shot at you.
Right.
I don't think the human brain in the heat of the moment tries to discern the difference of that, right? And so if you have a gun on your side, then it would seem logical that you might try to defend yourself. Now, was that the smartest thing to do against the police? Probably not. But what caused that to happen? And I say that because the police officers were told by somebody to go to 26th and Broadway and do what they did led to the situation that we had. And so I'm waiting very interestedly to find out what the results of that investigation are.
We hear a lot, not just in Louisville, but all over the country. And, opening an investigation. These investigations tend to take a long time.
Absolutely.
And many people would say some of them are dog and pony shows because, I mean, in terms of Breonna Taylor, I mean, the facts are out there. Witnesses have been spoken to. We know what happened.
Well, I would disagree with you.
Okay, go ahead.
I would say that we don't know what happened. The facts are out there based upon what we have learned from the media, and the facts are out there based upon what we know from the attorneys involved in the case. And what I would say is I have heard things repeated in the media that are not actually that I believe to be true. And I don't know that everything from the attorneys are always true, right? They have a motivation, right?
Right.
And so I'm waiting for that disinterested third party, which is the Attorney General's office and the FBI, to actually give us the facts so that we can have the debate and conversation about whatever those facts are.
And what is it in the media you believe isn't true?
Well, I'll just give you one example. In the very beginning, there was a report in the media that was being circulated that the police were at the wrong house. Well, we obviously know they weren't at the wrong house. That was the address on the search warrant, right? So things like that.
Okay. Gotcha. And in terms of, I mean, we already went about Breonna, that why did it have to happen at night, but at the same time, with David McAtee, I mean, again, de-escalation, why the need to be firing pepper
Exactly.
ball? I mean,
I agree.
it just seems that the culture here, very, very similar to other police departments, is force, intimidation, not de-escalation, dialogue, and many, many deaths are happening as a result of that. What do you attribute that? Because a lot of the protesters feel, a lot of the protesters I've spoken to feel the police kind of get off on this, messing with them, intimidating them, mainly white police officers.
I attribute it to poor leadership. This is nothing but poor leadership. And if you have poor leadership running the police department, then it trickles down. And so, again, somebody in leadership decided that within 3 seconds of arriving at the intersection of 26th and Broadway on a Sunday night for people gathered on the parking lot, which is what happens every Sunday night, that this time they were going to start yelling at people about a curfew and shooting them with pepper balls. Somebody made that decision within the police department or in the administration that this is a good idea to do. And I would venture to say to you that same thing would not have happened on another side of town.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of the other side of town, I mean, you can't really escape it if you drive a few blocks away from here. Mm-hmm. It's just poverty. It's not just Louisville, but can you kind of talk about this movement, Black Lives Matter, is specifically about life and not getting killed, but there are economic demands too because
Absolutely.
they are languishing in poverty. What's attributing to this tale of two cities in Louisville and other parts of the country, and how do you make a real dent in it without, frankly, redistributing money towards black business, social services, that kind of thing?
So what I would say is that so there is systemic racism built into the policies that created. It wasn't that all of a sudden black people woke up one day and said, "Oh, we all want to live together," right? That was done through redlining and deed restrictions and products of the federal government, products of state government, and products of local government to create the situation that was created for centuries. And so in order to fix all that, it requires reinvestment in those areas deliberately and deliberate policy changes to actually reverse that effort. And so that's what has to happen.
And how does this happen when it seems that whether it's the mayor, whether it's senators, I mean, we're seeing nationally there is just real culture war happening, this real, in my opinion, Trump trying to galvanize, in many ways, a race war. Can it happen on a local level if nationally these color lines are being drawn?
I think it has to happen on all levels, but I think that, for example, poverty is the key to this particular issue, right? And disinvestment in certain areas of cities across the country, and disinvestment in public education, disinvestment in people. We have a president that during the middle of a COVID crisis is trying to kill health care for millions of people in our country, right? We have conversations about a living wage or a minimum wage that is getting no traction at the federal level, which is where it needs to happen. The minimum wage, the living wage should be a national deal, because if Louisville or Kentucky, for example, does it, but Indiana doesn't, or business is going to move to Indiana because they could pay people lower,
Right.
Probably. And so it's always been a national deal, and it should do that. And it's incumbent upon the federal government to set those minimum standards, because people living in poverty is unacceptable for the richest country in the world. I mean, it's just unacceptable.
You think the Democratic Party is doing enough? Because nationally, I mean, right now is a time where you would think people need some type of universal basic income. We're facing evictions soon in Louisville and other places. the Democrats nationally went along with bailing out corporations in the first bill. Now they're talking about, $1 trillion to states and cities, but I mean, that doesn't get money into the pockets of people to pay their rent necessarily.
Right.
What should councils and the mayor do for Louisville in 3 weeks? Moratoriums, people continually losing their jobs. We're facing unemployment extension expiring.
So locally, what we're doing, we put $21.2 million of the budget into rent relief because of COVID, and also $21.2 million into small business relief because of COVID in this current budget that we're in. And nationally, however, I think it's something that has to be handled at the national level. That's where the actual big money is. Cities weren't designed to be able to handle financially those type of situations. It's truly incumbent upon the federal government to do that, and they should.
And ending back on Breonna Taylor, what is her family supposed to think? I mean, I spoke with her aunt. They're not getting much communication. They still have a lot of questions. It's been over 3 months now, and essentially one officer was fired, but they feel just pretty much insulted that not only have they lost their child, but this is going on with no answers. They also seem to think, based on the news, that there's gentrification efforts in the area of the city where this happened. What would be your message to them?
So I learned about the gentrification allegations the same time everybody else did, and so the council is going to be asking the administration about what's that all about. As far as the lack of communication, a lot of people are disappointed in that. I'm disappointed in that. The council's disappointed in that. Again, the people with the information is the mayor and the police chief, and they've chosen not to share that information. We've asked them to. I've several times demanded it. They have yet to do that. So I would simply say that we are anxiously awaiting to learn information. I share their frustration with the administration. We were very frustrated with the administration also.
And I know that the council has talked about opening up an investigation into how the mayor has handled this. What do you attribute that to? Because we have mayors all over the country that are being pushed to defund the police reform, and there's a lot of hesitancy. Does that have to do with police unions and donations to mayors? You can't get in his head, but like what?
I think it's very simple. We need police departments, period. All right, and so whether there are people that agree we need police departments or not, that's a whole different story. But we need police departments. All right. And public safety is the number one responsibility of government, number one. And so I can't tell you what's in the mayor's head about anything. You have to really have to talk to him about that. But it's not a either-or situation. It is not you fund the police or you fund mental health. You fund both. And so I know that that's what you want to talk about, but the reality is you fund both.
Right. Well, I'm just saying, it seems that, we have this gaping hole being exposed, not just mental health, but the poverty, the PTSD of a lot of these people. And, I mean, there's been some positive things done since her death, but the systemic poverty seems to be a much bigger issue.
It is.
That this mayor has not addressed.
That's correct, and that's on him.
And last question, you're looking at the protests continuing all over the country. Obviously, we're in a presidential election season, but for black people that are protesting, we're starting to see black candidates winning in certain areas. What do you feel? How should this protest movement evolve? Because I do think a lot in government, corporate America, might in the back of their minds be just, we'll let them protest until it kind of burn themselves out.
No, I think it's about policy change. It's about using this energy, using the horrible deaths of Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, David McAtee, Ahmaud, all these deaths, and take that energy and create public policy that reflects a country, a city, a state that truly values everybody that lives in that city, country, and state, and make positive changes in our country so that we're all treated equally and fairly. And that's the best that can come from these horrible situations.
And ask you one more time. You're saying you need more information before you could make a decision if these officers should be charged that killed Breonna Taylor?
I don't know what happened. I have no idea what happened.
Mm-hmm.
I know that she's dead, and I know that the police did it, but I don't know who did it.
Mm-hmm. So that's the information that the council's waiting on.
Right.
Got it. Thank you, Council President David James, here in Louisville, Kentucky. We will be posting more videos as the days goes on. Peace.